Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, The Third Bara, where we discuss financial independence and investing in the Trinidad and Tobago stock market. I've been on a slight hiatus, as you probably noticed, and during my hiatus, I reflected on whether or not I should have any comments related to the upcoming general elections for Trinidad and Tobago. And I think as managing a channel, I should have some sort of input in the national discourse. And in particular, I want to focus on the Auditor General, who currently is Miss Jaiwanti Ramdas. And as you can see from the Trinidad and Tobago Auditor General website, her resume is up there with the best. And for those who don't know, the Auditor General is tasked with auditing all the financial management issues related to how the government is spending money, how the government is receiving money, uh, and all the issues related to transparency in terms of procurement, etc. And I think the Auditor General report has a lot of value in terms of assessing how has the current government been administering the people's business. And during an election, we like to see well, not we like to see, but we see politicians claiming their manifesto is better than the other manifesto, and they talk about potholes in the road, they talk about the usual stuff, crime, jobs, etc., all these promises, but we rarely ever financially sort of look at the issues, the systemic issues that plague any government that's currently trying to administer the business of Trinidad and Tobago. And the Auditor General focuses on these sort of systemic issues. And I think I should throw this out there so that it can at least inform the national discourse before citizens cast their vote. So, what I've done is that I came to the Auditor General's website, and you can see under publications, they are the annual reports. And these annual reports go back years, decades, in fact. And it's out there. This is public knowledge. So, on behalf of my subscribers, I decided that, you know what, I will analyze these annual Auditor General reports in a similar way that I analyze companies that I'm thinking about investing in. So I took the last three reports because these reports would be give us information on how the current administration have been administering the country's affairs, and it will highlight key issues, key systemic issues that I think you should go back to your relevant representative and just get their view on how would they address these issues. So what I've done, I've analyzed these reports through my artificial intelligence program, and I've outputted the analysis in a very easy to listen to podcast format. So this is a bit different to what I've done before on this channel. So I hope you enjoy. Sit back, relax, and listen, and let me know in the comments what you think about the key issues that were highlighted in the Auditor General's report. Thank you.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling something really important, especially if you're thinking about voting for the first time.
Yeah, we're digging into these, well, let's face it, pretty dense government audit reports.
Exactly. The Auditor General's reports from 2022-2021, and we'll also touch on some of the COVID-19 spending follow-ups.
Our mission really is to pull out the crucial stuff. What do these reports actually tell us about how the government's been managing public money?
Forget wading through hundreds of pages. That's our job today. We'll guide you through the key takeaways.
Think of it like getting the essential briefing notes. We want you to understand the performance side, the financial management, so you can ask informed questions come election time.
Absolutely. It can seem like a lot, but we'll break it down, point out the potential red flags and the important insights.
And remember, the Auditor General is independent. They use international standards, things like risk assessment, professional skepticism. It's a proper examination.
Okay, so let's jump right in. The Auditor General's report for 2022. This gives us a financial picture up to, September 30th, 2022.
That's right. And one of the first big headline numbers is always public debt.
And it's quite something, the external debt especially.
Yeah, over $28.4 billion. That's billion with a B, as of September 2022.
Wow, that's hard to even picture.
It is. And importantly, it was up from the year before by about $591 million, or just over 2%.
So the debt load increased in that period. And that means higher payments later on, right? Principal and interest.
Exactly. More money going towards servicing debt. The report mentions the payments made that year, too.
And tied into that, there's this other figure. Loans serviced by the Ministry of Finance, Head 18.
Ah, yes. That's a big one. Over $3.4 billion. This is basically debt from state enterprises and statutory authorities.
So entities that took out loans couldn't pay them back.
And now the government, meaning the taxpayer, is footing the bill. It's a significant ongoing cost stemming from past issues.
That really raises questions about the guarantees given in the first place, doesn't it? And the sustainability.
It certainly does. As a new voter, that's something to think about. How are these state entities managed? Why do they end up needing bailouts like this?
Then there were these bulky projects: build, operate, lease, transfer.
Right. These are often for big infrastructure things. Think the Ministry of Works head office, the National Library.
And the report showed outstanding balances of over $232 million for those.
Yeah, and interestingly, the payments for these long-term commitments were being booked under goods and services.
Which seems a bit odd. Isn't it more like a long-term financing deal?
Well, that's the point.
Yeah.
Classifying it that way might not give the clearest picture of the government's long-term financial obligations. It raises questions about transparency, perhaps.
Okay, let's flip over to the income side. Revenue. The 2022 report noted a pretty big jump.
Yeah, overall tax revenue was up by over 38%. Quite substantial.
What drove that mainly?
Mostly taxes on income and profits. They shot up by over 82%.
Wow. But not everything went up.
No, taxes on goods and services actually decreased quite significantly, down by about 32%.
So a real mixed bag there. More money from income taxes, less from things like VAT.
Seems like it. Could reflect changes in the economy. Maybe corporate profits were up, but consumer spending was down. It's complex.
Something for voters to consider, how different policies might affect these revenue streams.
Definitely. Now let's talk about managing the money day to day. The report mentions a slight dip in non-current assets, but a recurring issue popped up again.
Don't tell me. Deposit account reconciliations.
You got it. Still a problem. Ministries and departments not submitting their reconciliations as required.
It sounds so basic, like balancing your own bank account. Why is it still an issue?
Good question. It creates risks, right?
Yeah.
Errors, maybe even misuse of funds, could go unnoticed. The report specifically named the Judiciary, Ministry of Finance, Public Utilities.
And involved significant amounts of money, didn't it?
Absolutely. And it wasn't just delays. For the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government, some balances they held weren't even properly authorized.
Unauthorized balances. Yeah. And there was a discrepancy in the public trustee account, too.
Yep. It points to weaknesses in internal controls. If you don't know exactly what money you have and where it is, things can go wrong.
That lack of basic oversight is, well, it's concerning.
It is. It's fundamental financial management.
What about the specific funds? Any major movements?
Well, the sinking fund account, that's for future debt repayment, that saw an increase. But trust funds overall saw a decrease.
Okay. And the GATE fund and the green fund, those always get attention.
Right. In 2022, GATE, that's for tertiary education support, actually paid out more than it received.
So an operating deficit for GATE that year?
Correct. Meanwhile, the green fund for environmental projects saw its balance increase quite significantly.
Which raises the question, is that money being put to work effectively? Yeah. Or just accumulating?
Exactly. A large balance isn't necessarily good if it's not funding needed projects.
The report also briefly mentioned some old loans to St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
Dating way back, yeah. And the seized assets fund, holding money from legal cases, just part of the bigger financial picture.
Okay, now let's talk about the people actually handling the money in ministries.
Yeah.
The accounting officers. Still finding errors in their accounts.
Unfortunately, yes. The 2022 report mentions continued typographical errors and other basic mistakes in the appropriation accounts.
Even small errors, if they keep happening year after year, suggest a problem, right? Like a lack of attention to detail.
Or maybe training, yeah. It points to potential weaknesses in the system.
And the report identifies the big spenders: national security, education, health.
Predictably, yes. They handle huge portions of the national budget.
Which means, for voters, scrutinizing how effectively those ministries perform is really key. Are we getting value for that massive investment?
Precisely. The report also noted a change. Contract gratuity payments became more decentralized.
Okay. But there was still an issue of tracking commitments, money they plan to spend.
Yes, a persistent problem. Ministries not properly recording outstanding commitments. Table 3.4 listed specifics.
And the Ministry of Planning and Development had a mismatch. Their figures didn't agree with the audit.
Correct. If you're not accurately tracking what you've committed to spend, you don't have a real handle on your finances.
Right. And then the report dives into specific examples of, let's call them procedural slip-ups.
You could say that. Non-compliance with procurement and payment rules?
Like the Elections and Boundaries Commission getting stuff delivered that wasn't what they ordered.
Yep. Or Central Administrative Services Tobago having issues with unpresented checks.
And no invoice for air travel for some Met officers.
Right. These might seem small, but they add up to a picture of weak internal controls. Why the wrong goods? Why no invoice?
There was also incorrect accounting at the Attorney General's office.
The Ministry of Education not having a renewed agreement with PTSC, but still paying them.
And ministries renting properties without proper cabinet approvals or signed leases.
Exactly. A lack of formal agreements, lack of proper approvals that creates risk. Legal risks, financial risks.
The police service had issues too. Vehicle logs, contracts, unauthorized signatures.
Yes, internal control weaknesses highlighted there. And the Ministry of Social Development wasn't reconciling bank statements properly.
Ministry of Works extending contracts without formal agreements. It's a pattern.
It really is. Across different entities, we see this recurring theme. Rules aren't always being followed, basic controls seem weak, it increases the risk of errors, waste, maybe even fraud.
Okay, what about the revenue collectors, the receivers of revenue?
Well, the good news in 2022 was that total revenue collected was actually higher than the revised estimate.
So they brought in more money than expected.
Yes. But there was a mismatch between their records and the Treasury's records.
And agriculture didn't fully report on outstanding revenue. Maritime services had deposit discrepancies.
Right. So even if the overall collection is up, these inconsistencies and reporting gaps make it hard to get a perfectly clear picture. Transparency needs accurate details.
And the specific funds managed by administering officers. Any standout issues there?
The report stressed the need for proper accounting systems for each fund.
And gave an example where that wasn't happening.
Yes, the National Union of Government and Federated Workers Training Fund. Apparently, they hadn't done bank reconciliations for ages.
So you couldn't even verify their cash balance.
Exactly, which is pretty concerning for any fund, let alone one for training workers.
What about the big development funds, IDF?
The Infrastructure Development Fund, yeah. It saw spending, but receipts were higher than payments in 2022.
Okay. And we mentioned Gates deficit and green fund surplus already.
Right.
Now, the report also looks specifically at municipal corporations and the Tobago House of Assembly, focusing on development projects.
Yes, looking at their tendering processes, internal controls for those projects.
And the findings. Were they consistent across different corporations?
Disturbingly so in many cases. Issues popped up in Arima, Benaldebi, Princestown, San Fernando, San Juan Laventil, Superior.
What kind of issues?
A whole range. Unspent money not managed right, contracts awarded without proper justification or following rules, project delays with no penalties, questionable suppliers being used, cash books not updated, evaluation reports missing signatures, no proper contract registers kept.
Wow, it's quite a list.
Errors in recording money coming in and going out, weak record keeping overall, people signing for bank accounts who weren't authorized, even failure to produce basic things like cash books when asked.
That paints a picture of pretty significant weaknesses at the local government level, doesn't it? Affecting development projects directly.
Absolutely. These aren't just accounting footnotes. They translate into potential delays, inefficiencies, and lack of accountability for projects that impact communities directly.
The 2022 report also mentioned a follow-up audit on COVID spending by the regional health authorities, focusing on procurement.
Yes, indicating that the initial look likely raised enough questions to warrant digging deeper, specifically into how that pandemic money was procured and spent by the RHAs.
And finally, for 2022, the Ministry of Works Transport Division. Issues with their IT systems.
Right. The audit looked at systems like vehicle registration using international IT standards.
And found
A lack of internal audit review of these systems, even though it had been recommended before. They needed more IT audit skills.
so oversight of critical IT was lacking.
Seems so. And certain IT governance, business continuity, and asset management standards weren't being met for the Traffic Enforcement Center unit specifically. In today's world, that's a significant risk.
Okay, so that covers the key points from 2022. Let's shift gears now to the Auditor General's report for 2021, covering the year ending September 30th, 2021.
Right. And the overall opinion there was based on cash accounting. One thing that stood out early was the exchequer account, the government's main checking account, essentially.
What about it?
It was consistently in overdraft, and the overdraft actually increased compared to the previous year.
Not a great sign.
Yeah.
Shows ongoing financial pressure.
Exactly. The 2021 report also repeated the responsibilities of accounting officers and mentioned the audit scope.
And the limitation regarding tax info, was that still there?
Yes, unfortunately. The Auditor General still couldn't get access to income tax information from the Inland Revenue Division due to that ongoing legal matter, a major persistent limitation.
Which really hampers a full audit of revenue, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Big questions about transparency there.
The 2021 report also breaks down public debt, again noting an increase in external debt. Sounds familiar.
Yes, a consistent trend across both reports. And it highlighted contingent liabilities, too.
Those are potential future debts, like government guarantees on loans.
Exactly. A significant amount was listed, representing a potential risk down the road if those guarantees are called upon.
And bolt projects were mentioned again. Outstanding balances.
Yep, another recurring item.
Revenue collection was summarized compared to estimates. Debt servicing costs detailed.
Right. Breaking down principal and interest for local and foreign loans, seeing these items in both reports underlines that they are ongoing financial features or challenges.
The 2021 report also gave balances for special funds, NIB, IDF, GATE, Green Fund, etc., and the main government account, the Consolidated Fund.
Showed an increased deficit in 2021, another indicator of the overall fiscal pressure.
Okay, and when it looked at the individual ministries and their accounting officers in 2021, more errors?
Yes, errors and omissions in the appropriation accounts again. Several ministries spent over $1 billion.
Any specific ministry issues flagged in 2021?
A few. Ministry of Legal Affairs lacked bank reconciliations for some periods. The Personnel Department had vehicle advances with no repayments being made.
No payments.
Various ministries used Treasury advances. Trade and industry had discrepancies in reported contract balances.
Police service had unverifiable commitments. Planning and development had commitment discrepancies again. Agriculture had issues with vehicle records.
Yes, and yes. It's that pattern again. Suggests recommendations aren't sticking or systemic issues aren't being fixed.
The 2021 report went into quite a bit of detail on the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services, didn't it? Especially regarding grants.
It did. Really significant findings there. For the senior citizen grant, they found payments going to deceased people.
Deceased beneficiaries.
Wow. And multiple payments to the same person in some cases.
Okay. What about other grants?
The public assistance grant database was riddled with problems. Blank fields, mismatched IDs, and dates of birth made it hard to even verify if payments were correct.
And the disability grants.
Similar issues. Blank fields, same ID number used for different people, mismatched info. Plus, there was no clear policy on whether someone could receive multiple grants.
That sounds chaotic. For programs meant to help the vulnerable.
It points to serious potential for errors and inefficiency in administering these vital social programs. Data integrity seemed to be a major weakness.
What else for 2021? Ministry of Sport had unpaid invoices.
Yes. And then there was more on the COVID-19 relief grants, the SRG and ISG.
More problems found there.
Yeah. Payments to ineligible people, data mismatches again, and unclear criteria for who qualified for Phase 2 of the ISG.
So issues in rolling out that emergency support.
Seems so. The Ministry of Health also had discrepancies in its reported COVID spending, including a donation that wasn't properly recorded. And the SUV PAC program, funded externally, was also mentioned with some issues.
The pandemic spending clearly faced major accountability challenges.
Under pressure, yes, but the audits highlight where controls seem to falter.
What about revenue collection in 2021? Any issues there?
The report compared actual collection to estimates, noted outstanding revenue, but specifically highlighted problems collecting fines related to COVID-19 breaches.
So people were fined but didn't pay, and collection was weak.
Apparently. Plus, several receivers of revenue failed to submit their reports on outstanding arrears.
And deposit account reconciliations, still an issue in 2021.
Oh yes, problems noted at Foreign Affairs, Agriculture, Housing, Works, and Transport, including significant unclaimed balances just sitting there.
More evidence of basic cash management weaknesses.
Seems to be the case.
Okay. Looking at the specific funds managed by administering officers in 2021?
The report noted various withdrawals. The Unemployment Relief Program Fund at the THA had a big difference between its cash book and bank balance.
And reconciliations were late.
Yes. And commitments were shifted to the contingencies vote. The Infrastructure Development Fund balance decreased that year.
An unapproved commitment at housing.
Correct. The report also described the Green Fund's purpose and levy. The CARICOM Petroleum Fund balance went up due to interest. The Wastewater Fund balance was noted.
And finally, for 2021, there was that special report just on COVID-19 spending, right? Following up on earlier concerns.
Exactly. Focused on municipal corporations, RHAs, statutory bodies.
And it found continued problems.
Yes. Non-compliance with rules about unspent COVID funds at several corporations, like Princestown, Curvidaca de Pero, Diego Martin.
What about aid distribution? Hampers and such.
Major issues there. Lack of proper recipient lists, lack of signatures to prove people actually got the aid. Found in Point Fortin, Princestown, Cuva, Diego Martin, Rio Claro.
So poor tracking of who got help.
And questionable spending, too, like painting a market in Princestown. Was that really a COVID expense? And Point Fortin had issues with buying tablets.
Tablets, what kind of issues?
Using an unapproved supplier, counselors getting tablets without signing for them, missing signatures from other recipients. Just weak controls.
So that emergency spending faced serious accountability questions.
Definitely. The special report really zeroed in on that.
It also looked at ANAM-DDVCO, the agricultural marketing body.
Yes. Issues with spending on market boxes, distribution lists from constituency offices didn't always match up, generally weak documentation.
And the RHAs again?
SWRHA had problems with accounting for fixed assets, unaccounted for donations, payroll discrepancies, capital items wrongly expensed.
Unaccounted donations.
Yep. Tobago RHA hadn't updated its asset register. ERHA's total COVID spending was reported.
What about the Tobago House of Assembly in that special report?
Several findings. No proper contract for a quarantine facility, discrepancies and missing documents for rental assistance payments.
And their Emergency Social Assistance Card Program, ESACP.
Big problems there, too. Multiple cards issued to the same person, cards issued without application forms, suggests significant control weaknesses.
And lastly, some basic issues, like licensing authority not depositing funds on time, lacking a cash book. San Fernando's cash book not updated.
Yes, reinforcing that pattern of fundamental accounting lapses even during the crisis period.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground, digging through both the 2022 and 2021 reports, plus that special focus on COVID spending. As we wrap up, what are the big themes emerging here for, someone trying to understand government performance before they vote?
I think the most striking thing is the persistence of certain issues. It's not just one bad year or one isolated problem. We're seeing recurring weaknesses in financial management across the board, ministries, state bodies, local government.
Yeah, things like basic accounting errors, documentation gaps, problems with reconciling accounts, not always following procurement rules.
Exactly. And then there are the more specific concerning examples, the scale of those unverified deposit accounts you mentioned, the real questions around how COVID relief funds were distributed, the inconsistencies in tracking assets.
And for a new voter, how does this connect to their decision?
Well, these audits are like an independent checkup on how taxpayer money is being handled. They raise fundamental questions about accountability. Are people being held responsible? About transparency. Is the government being open about its finances? And about efficiency. Are we getting the best value, the best services for the money spent?
So understanding these past performance issues, these patterns, can really inform how you evaluate candidates and parties in the next election.
Absolutely. It gives you a basis to ask critical questions.
So maybe the final thought for everyone listening, especially new voters, is this. Given what we've discussed, what aspects of government performance, financial management, transparency, efficiency will be most critical for you when you cast your vote?
And following on from that, what specific questions do these audit findings make you want to ask those who are seeking office? What assurances are you looking for?
Definitely food for thought. We encourage you to reflect on this, maybe look into things further. This deep dive gives you a starting point, but staying informed as the election gets closer is key.